Good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this new edition of the European Film Forum here at the 72nd edition of the Cannes Film Festival. We're really happy to have you gathered here in this room at the Palais des Festivals this afternoon, just for one reason. This afternoon, we're talking about talents and great European talents. How can we empower them? How can we foster innovation through their incredible perspective and the way they're telling us stories and incredible stories when it comes to their very first films, for instance? We will actually dive into this creativity part with amazing filmmakers. Of course, we'll have the producer perspective too on where to find them, how to foster them again, how to finance them. And then in the end, of course, as you know it, you're always crucial to this European Film Forum. So if you have questions or reactions, please raise your hands and the mic will magically come to you so that your voice can be heard. And now, please join me in welcoming Giuseppe Abbamonte, the Director of Media Policy for the Media Program.
Thanks very much, Marjorie, and good afternoon, everybody. Every time you pronounce my name as a French, you're wrong.
Really? No.
And you have all the Giuseppe, the famous one, Mazzini, Garibaldi, Verdi, were turning in their graves. It's Giuseppe, not Giuseppe.
Okay, so
but
let me do it again.
I'm used to it.
Let me try it once again. Giuseppe.
That's perfect.
Did it wrong? Thank you.
So I'm truly delighted to be here with you, and what I will try to do, and then you tell me if the narrative fits together, is try and explain what is the strategic vision for the new media program, and how this, in our opinion, goes hand in hand with the policy initiatives and the regulatory initiatives. So the Europe's cultural and creative sectors, we've seen today when we discussed the guarantee facility and access to funding, represent a market of approximately 6.7 million employees with 2.5 million companies, which means that a significant part of Europe's wealth is based on our ability to produce, invent, and reinvent and transform culture. Europe supports the audiovisual sector through a mix of financial and regulatory actions, and our financial support to the audiovisual industry holds the power to facilitate, well, first of all, transnational cooperation. So the more we cooperate, the more the stuff circulates and the less we fight. So cooperation, international cooperation, is very important in Europe. So holds the power also to facilitate transition of existing models to new business models, and the emergence of future talents across the value chain. And this is what the media program, so Creative Europe Media, is all about. The program is shaped around the specificities of the European audiovisual industry, so its cultural and language diversity, the role of its independent filmmakers, its markets and festivals, some of the strongest global brands of this global industry. We do value our creative patchwork and our different ways of storytelling, and we are building on our diversity, on the richness of our history and cultural heritage to write the stories, and we hope compelling stories, of the future. So I will give you two examples which are quite telling. The first is Cold War, which was presented last year in Cannes by Paweł Pawlikowski, which was also an Oscar nominee this year. And it is a Polish-French-UK co-production, a distinctively European film, but with an international appeal. And I will return on the issue of the international appeal, proudly supported by the media program. We are also building on Europe's contemporary society and challenges. Another example, Dogman, by Matteo Garrone, also supported by the program, which was also presented in Cannes last year, a story of social realism, so characteristically Italian. I mean, Dogman can't be American, it's an Italian story, where a background of outskirt, desolation, and abandonment unveils a universe of deep human feelings. And I believe that this capacity of exploring humanity in a multifaceted, non-simplistic, and very important adjective, unconventional fashion, with a deep focus on characters, is one of the strongest assets of the audiovisual sector in Europe, one that Creative Europe Media has supported and will continue to support in the future. As you all know, we are at a turning point for the EU budget, hence for all the European programs. Last year, the Commission proposal reflected our ambition for the audiovisual sector. So concretely, we tabled an increase in budget of 30%, which is an extraordinary increase in budget in these times of tight finances, Brexit, competing priorities. The negotiations have started on the right footing, but nothing is granted yet. The final phase of the negotiations will start in earnest after the elections, and we shall keep on and further develop the positive mobilization of our stakeholders. All the people in the room, please give us a help in securing the money. So, of course, our ambition in terms of budget should serve our ambition and be justified by our ambitions in terms of actions. And these are the key points that I would like to make, and we should guide our endeavors in the negotiation of the new program and the new budget. The first issue is the aim of reaching larger international audiences within Europe and beyond. So this will be at the core of the new program. The changing consumption habits and ways to reach out to different audiences, including the younger audiences, should be addressed since the development stage of a movie. So we would like cultural diversity to be much more than a theoretical concept. We want films to be seen. So we want films to be watched by citizens, and as many citizens in Europe and people beyond Europe. So this means accompanying the promotion and marketing of European productions from the outset much more effectively than we do it today. In a moment where global competitors develop promotional strategies that are ever more pervasive and at the same time more personalized and targeted, we cannot afford to miss this train. So even if our industry cannot count on the same budgets that say our American friends, we need to explore all possible ways to make sure that our beautiful stories find their audiences. The second point, so the first point is international appeal will be rewarded. The second point is that the current actions of the program will be broadly maintained, but with a strong focus on innovation. So in order to reach out to new audiences, we need to develop new innovative contents. We must promote experimentation, so from virtual reality, immersive content, artificial intelligence, from co-writing and co-creation to edu-entertainment. Our future support will be aiming even more at innovative solutions, and it is a crossover between the media program and Horizon 2020 now and the future of Horizon 2020, so possibly the digital program. So there is something that, so the audiovisual sector can be a testing bed for these new technologies. So we could, for example, support immersive cultural heritage experiences on-site and virtual on a highly engaging manner in enhancing the user's experience through the production of high-quality, interactive digital stories that can highlight the unique characteristics of the specific sites and collections, be Versailles, the Colosseum, or El Prado. So a sector, so the third point, so just to sum up, international appeal, innovation. The third thing is European series. So a sector that has been booming in the last years is serial storytelling. So I can tell you that European series will be very much at the top of our strategic agenda. So they will be on our radars. We want to be able to support the next European successes, the next Babylon Berlin, or the next, I don't know what it's called in English, L'Amica Geniale,
My brilliant friend.
My brilliant friend. Series is also a sector in which collective writing is the norm, so bringing together different talents from different countries in the script writing process for this to be as internationally appealing as possible. So as I said before, we like co-productions because co-productions travel, so we want to promote cooperation across the program, and we believe that the creation of this room of storytellers coming from different corners of Europe may also enhance the international appeal and the possibility for something to travel across border. The fourth point is cinemas, festivals, and online platforms will also be key in reaching out to wider audiences. Take the European Cinema Network, so we want to expand it towards smaller cities in Central and Eastern Europe, moving from 269 cities in 2016 to 400 cities in 2027. So based on this successful example, the one of European cinemas, we would like to encourage structured networks of European VOD services and festivals. So this could result in substantial economies of scale and create virtuous dynamics of cooperation, exchange, and internationalization of content and audiences. The fifth point is training and mentoring. So this will be really, really important. So facilitating cooperation, and especially international cooperation, is one of the key ways to nurture our European talents. So in order to accommodate a growing demand and growing needs for training, priority will be given to 5,000 professionals per year from the current 2,000, focusing in particular on new technologies, marketing, and distribution. So we will in particular facilitate mentoring opportunities, especially for women and for women audiovisual professionals. So we spoke a lot about access to finance before. Access to finance is very, very important in all the fields, but in this field in particular. It is very important to be able to overcome some prejudice about the risky business of this particular industry. That's why we have put in place the guarantee facility, which has been a great success and which is always accompanied by, it's called a capacity building process mechanism, which aims at facilitating the gauging of the risk inherent in a project by the banks. So, and we believe that, the guarantee facility with its leverage factor of 10, and together with the capacity building mechanism, should make it easier for the sector to borrow money and for the banks also to lend out money. Something which is important is that in the future, the tool, so the guarantee facility, will be part of, will no longer be will be carved out from Creative Europe, and will be embedded in the new instrument, which is called Invest EU. So, a few words, I don't know how much time. Do you have 2 more minutes?
2 more minutes, just for you.
So, 2 more minutes. I mean, the last, I would say, 15 months have been months of struggle for us because of the copyright reform and because of the completion of the audiovisual media services framework. Everything is interlinked. So through the media program we support, so we give financial support. We have, under the new audiovisual media services framework, the quotas for the VOD platforms combined with a prominence requirement. So it's something which is very, very important. And since VOD platforms, which are very often American VOD platforms and global players, will have to produce, if they want to meet the quotas more in Europe, it is quintessential that the creatives, so be scriptwriters, authors, directors, are appropriately and proportionately remunerated. Hence, we have in the copyright reform new rules on the remuneration of the author, of the creators, so authors and performers, new rules on transparency, and new rules which will allow them to adjust the remuneration in the contract if there is a disproportion between commercial success and the remuneration originally agreed. We can talk forever about Article 17, the original Article 13 of the Copyright Directive, but I will spare you that. So I would like to finish now. In the global race for competitiveness, Europe's creative power, diversity, and talents are amongst our most precious assets. The logic for refitting our regulatory framework, as well as for investing in Europe's creativity, is undisputed and compelling. So in other words, investing in our creative independent powerhouses and talents pays off as they bring economic value and a sense of togetherness and belonging to a broad community of shared values. And that is something which is very important because the European Union, after all, is not just an economic concept, but a way of life. So I look very much forward to the outcome of our discussions today, which I very much hope will help us shape up our future media support to nurture Europe creativity. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you very much, Mr. Abbamonte. I'm not risking the surname this time. So, of course, as you know, we're going to highlight brilliant European talents. And being European doesn't necessarily mean being born in Europe. And you'll see this in a minute with Carla Simon and Shahrbanoo Sadat, who are actually joining us on stage. They're two incredible young filmmakers who actually made it to their very first work on screen this year. Good afternoon to you, ladies. We're really happy to have you both with us on stage to open this afternoon, just for the reason you're women. And also because, of course, you're talented filmmakers. You both told your stories on screen this year, and it's actually very intimate type of storytelling that you wanted to show to audiences. But in the meantime, intimate probably means universal, right? Carla?
Yes, it's very curious because when you tell something that it feels very personal, as a director, you don't know if it's going to touch many people. The producers know. Like my producer kept telling me, yes, I think that this story can touch many people, but we never expected that the film would be seen as much as it has been seen. And yeah, because at the end it's a human story and we can all relate to that. In any part of the world, so this is very nice that this happens and we realize that we are all humans.
It's the very same to you, actually, Shahrbanoo.
In my case, I'm very much interested in the everyday life of people and in the small stories and in details. But where I'm coming from, I live in Kabul, in Afghanistan. And it's a little bit makes it difficult because I guess the world is not really prepared to hear everyday's life from Afghanistan. They expect more to hear big things, chaos, women and burqa, Taliban, like this kind of subjects. So I think it's a little bit difficult, but also on the other hand, it's very interesting to fight this battle, to tell, to get rid of the cliche picture of countries like Afghanistan and tells other kind of story.
And I was actually stating the fact that you don't necessarily need to be born in Europe to actually be part of European talents, right? It's, of course, obvious when it comes to you and your work. It's also obvious when it comes to Carla, even though you're Spanish. But still, what does Europe mean to you girls? When we're saying and trying to think about a definition of what a European work could be, what comes to your mind?
For me, it's the place where I learn, basically, because I study in Spain and I spent 1 year in the States, but then I studied in London and I had the chance to meet people from all over the world, and I realized that like my influences are a lot of European filmmakers, and for me, when I started making films thinking that I could be part of this, it made me really proud. And for me, it means diversity, basically. It means that I can learn a lot from all these countries that maybe I've been or not, and through cinema you learn, you kind of get the culture of these places, and you get to know their languages. So for me, it's like diversity would be a good definition, and also I like the fact of like having this possibility of like unifying in a concept that it's called Europe. Yeah.
What about you?
For me, I guess I have more emotional feeling and connection with Europe, because Europe means for me my career as a filmmaker. I mean, there is no really financing or a source for making film in Afghanistan. So I'm coming from a country with zero support for culture and for cinema. And I'm not European, it's obvious, and I live in Kabul, but it's like I'm not European, but I make European film. And I have the producer from Europe and all my crew, they are European, and my audience are European. So I make film about Afghanistan for European audience, which I think it's very, very, very important to me. And and basically, if I put it in a simple way, Europe gives me the opportunity to make film, and I get money from here, and they open the arms for me, and in this case, I guess I'm very attached emotionally to Europe because it gives me the opportunity to make film.
So it's definitely a question about opening minds and borders, right? Again, it's not limited to the state members, but also what we want to come across again is fostering talents is definitely not about, simple, strict, basic, simple borders. It's definitely about trying to broaden our minds to, when you thought about reaching out to the media program to actually finance your film, because we need money to have those great ideas put into motion and on screens, what was the very first reflexes you had? I mean, was it that super obvious for you as young filmmakers to reach out to the media program? Or did you have to make some research and do the math before actually coming across the program?
For me, it is quite obvious, basically, because like being as an audience, and you go to the cinema and to all these cinemas that media supports, like I've seen the logo of media all my life. So basically, for me, it's like, what is media? If we want to make films, maybe we should check it. But basically, I had the producer who obviously she knew what it was, and what I think that it means when you are starting is like, if you get media, I saw like how happy my producer was when we got media, and I realized that it's basically because it's a stamp of quality. Like this is the most important thing that will surely help when you need to get your financing from your country. So this is one thing, and then also it's development money, which is super important, because when we start making films and we write, maybe you don't have much money, basically, and nobody's gonna pay for you while you write, unless you get this kind of funding. So this was very important, and in my case, for my first film and for the film I'm preparing now, even if we'll shoot it next year, we already started the casting. So this is development money that can help also in the casting process, which is something that if we didn't have this money, we couldn't start. So, and the film wouldn't have the cast it has, So it just it's a support in a very, very delicate and important part of the project that, in the case of Spain, we don't have development money, so it's super important, yeah.
So it's really important to have this support by design and from a very early stage when you're just fostering the idea of the next work to put on screen, right?
Well, in my case, I didn't see the logo all my life. But I have an amazing German-Danish producer, Katja Adamite, who knows every corner where the money is.
She's a good producer, though.
She is. And she was really like looking for different money and for developing, as you said, and for production, for post-production, and to really like gather money from all over. Because in my case, it was a little bit difficult to fit to all kind of financial funding, because I'm carrying the Afghan passport, and for some funding, it is important that the director is European in passport, and it is important that, for example, you shoot in Europe, or your cast is from Europe, or like you have, especially if there is this plus point, that you need to get more plus point to confirm that you're really like double European kind of. So for this kind of reason, I was not really fit to some funding, but the one that I was fitting there, so Katja fought, and we also received a lot of support, and and I was agree with what you said, Clara, about the developing money. That is quite difficult to get money when you start working on it, because you don't really have that much document to show to people that what is in your head, and it's really important this money that you get in the beginning, because it helps you to go to a step on your path and get more money.
Now, again, this year has been a great achievement for the both of you, with the very first of your work, and we hope long career to come, been put on screen. And you were telling us that you were already working on the next episode and the next work you want audiences to see. I'm coming back to a question about genres and about stories European filmmakers can actually tell audiences. Sky's the limit? Or do you feel that we're still limiting ourselves as European filmmakers and creators to a very certain amount of topics we want to tell audiences? Should we also broaden our minds and perspective on the story we want to tell?
That's a difficult question. The thing is that I don't think there are many stories to tell. Like all the stories kind of talk about the same, which is like human things that narrow into like 4 things basically. Where I think it's important to be open and keep open is on the way of telling these stories. I think that it's very important that the European cinema is diverse, also in its form. That we have like really like experimental and independent, super like narrow audience films, but then we also have art house films that can be for all public, and then we have films that can be for younger public. So I think that this is important, and this is what makes like the cinema diverse. And I think that we do have this, and maybe we could have it more. I don't know, but I like. Just being here in Cannes and going to the cinema, and you see all these different kind of cinemas, and for me it's so inspiring. And it's like maybe there are films that I couldn't make as a filmmaker, of course, or I wouldn't like to do that, but I love it as audience, and I like to keep open and watch all these forms, because at the end, to me, cinema is an art, and it needs to have a lot of forms.
And in my case, what I wanted to tell. No, I wanted to tell that, well, first I should say that I'm a very hardcore critic about the films with the topic of Afghanistan. And I'm really annoyed by the films made about Afghanistan, because it doesn't tell anything new and it doesn't tell anything more. It's just repeating the same thing that we already know about Afghanistan, that okay, it's a war country, there is a extremist terrorist group having activities there, and like this kind of picture that is on about Afghanistan. But me as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, I live there. So before I'm a filmmaker, I'm a person living there as an ordinary person, right? But then I get money from Europe to make film, and this is the only way that I can make film, which I'm grateful for that. But as a scriptwriter, as a storyteller, I'm really in a special situation, because I don't want to repeat the same thing that the world knows about Afghanistan already, and it is more acceptable for the world, for the market to see from Afghanistan. I don't want to repeat this. I can't. And then on the other hand, I want to tell the stories about Afghanistan, about everyday's life, about the life that I'm living every day, about the things that I think it is important to tell about Afghanistan. But then I have to consider, who is my audience? I should always question myself, who is my audience? Who is my audience? And then I should always find a balance between what I think it is important to tell and who is my audience, and how I can give this new picture of Afghanistan to an audience that they don't know that much about Afghanistan, in a way that it's simple and understandable for an international audience. So I have to find I have to make a balance between my heart and my brain to find a simpler story, and especially because, of course, when we talk about Afghanistan, the history is so chaotic, it's so dramatic, it's a lot of things, events, a lot of things is happening that it's, you cannot really find a simple, flat story when you talk about Afghanistan, because even if you talk about everyday's life, the everyday's life is so different with everyday's life in Kabul. I mean, for example, I give you, in Europe, sorry. For example, I give you an example. When I am out of my house in Kabul, there is the possibility that I get killed, like many other people. And there are like 5 million people living in this small town, and everyone knows that, and everyone is fine with that. So the whole people that living in Kabul and also in the other parts of Afghanistan, they're automatically in the survival mood. So you don't, because a lot of things happen in a very high speed every day, and this is the everyday life that I'm talking about. Huh? So a lot of things happen that you don't really have time to think about the bad things, or to cry for the tragedy, or to, if you lose a friend, or if you lose a colleague, or if something happened, or you are witness of a terrorist attack or something, your brain doesn't allow you that you think that much about these things, because these things happens every day, and your body kind of, for protecting you, you need to let it go. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to think about it, you know? And so it's very, I mean, the everyday's life, even, it's so different than Europe. And for me as a storyteller, it's always important to be a good storyteller to my international audience, but also to respect to Afghan audience, to tell a story that can say something new and something more honest and more realistic. Which I think I'm in the right direction, but I'm still struggling because I'm so emotional when it comes to Afghanistan, and I want to be loyal to what's happening in Afghanistan. But it's also important, it's also important to keep in mind that to bring this new picture of Afghanistan little by little. So, I mean, the people, they don't need to learn about Afghanistan in one film. But yeah.
And that probably the reason why we need a storyteller such as you to actually have this perspective and true way to actually understand what's going on in so many different parts of the world. Now, you did pronounce the word super important here, crucial audiences. We're actually financing, promoting, and putting stories on screen so that the messages and storytelling can come across audiences, right? As super young and talented female filmmakers, where do you actually engage with those audiences? Of course, there's theaters, and that's the reason why we're celebrating your work today, but there are also so many different screens out there and so many ways to actually engage with those audiences. What is your natural way of actually talking to these audiences and public?
You mean like where we show our films, basically?
Absolutely, in theaters, for instance, or other screens. What is supernatural for you to actually, again, have this story told?
I mean, I love cinema and I love the act of being in a theater with the collective and watch the film together. So I think that I wish and I hope this will never disappear, because I think that it is a unique experience that you cannot have in any kind of TV at home, basically. So for me, this is my place where I want my films to be shown. And it's like, of course, when you get distributors, it's such a nice feeling to know that like people in the States and in Argentina and in China or Japan, there are cinemas that are showing your film. And this is like, I couldn't imagine the satisfaction that this would bring me while I was making the film. And then it started like traveling. And this is like the best. Obviously, we think about festivals too. And we want to be in festivals because it's like a way to, it's what really puts us on the map somehow. So festivals are super important, but when you have this relationship with the audience and it just happens through Q&As basically, I think that it is very beautiful, and for me this is the place. And also, if we talk about audiences, I think that to me it's very important to talk also about education. And I think that media already is like puts money on that. I'm I teach in a project in Spain that we go in schools and high schools, and we make short films with the kids. So we make like films together, and we show them like art house films basically, or beats, because there wouldn't be time. But this, like, where I see like how their perspective on cinema transforms over a year after taking this course. And I think that for me, it's really, this is the only way to kind of grow the audiences. And I'm sure that like if this program was in every school in all over the world, I'm sure that the theaters would be full, but we are not there yet. So, but for me, education is just like the way to kind of create audiences.
Thank you very much.
I think I'm interested to make different film, different genre. I'm so interested in music and dancing and beliefs of people, you know, to make like a supernatural horror film. And I think it's very interesting. It's like a virgin genres when it comes to Afghanistan. Have you ever seen a horror film about Afghanistan, or a fantasy, or you know, a musical? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like we are always seeing like documentaries or dramas or war films, but it never goes to that kind of genres. And I think. What is my wish, my biggest wish, is to go to cinema, to making, I mean, of course I care for festivals and it's very important, it's very nice to send the films all over the world and people can see, but the most important is cinema theaters. It's at the end of the day, you can say that the film was successful or not based on the tickets that you're selling in the cinema. So my wish is that I can, with experiencing different genres, I can make a bigger audience. So I can go like more than art house film or more than like a series films about Afghanistan. And still, I mean, of course, I still care about the concept, and I want to make like something really honest and deep and good stories. But on the other hand, I want to put it in the other way. Imagine, like, I mean, because it's very funny, because for example, when I am out of Afghanistan, people asking me like, how is life in Afghanistan? And they expect me that I cry, and I'm like, yeah, the life is very hard. But actually, I have a very good life in Kabul. I mean, I really mean it. And I mean, and a lot of things, because of the setup, because of the people, because of the situation, a lot of comedy is going on. And then it always came in my mind like, it's actually very funny to make a comedy film about Afghanistan, because it's so humor, and it's, you know, like, it's not only like people are crying, it's also like laughing in the sense of humor and all this, that the war is washing them away and you never see them. So I think I would love to explore the other genres, to make the bigger audience, to reach the real audience, the one that they are not in the festival, but they are just choosing the film based on the, I don't know, whatever, and they go to the cinema and they watch film. I think I want to go to that.
Filmmaking is definitely about making a choice, right? If we had to sum it up, what is the very first synonym or word that comes in your mind while thinking about European creation? We heard about education, diversity, cultural diversity, story to be told. If we had to bear in mind one word.
It's difficult.
It's difficult, but I think I would say culture, probably, because I think that this is what cinema is, above all, and it is really like a way to transmit the culture of all the places. And it's beautiful when you watch films and then you visit the country and you think of the filmmaker. It happens to me all the time. It's like I've been here because I've seen these films. And this is like then it makes sense that film exists to me.
So culture for Carla and for you, Shahrbanoo?
Can you repeat your question?
If we had to bear in mind just one word that for you is the very good definition of what European cinema is, and culture and creation.
Yeah, well, I cannot say it in one word. Don't expect that. But I think for me, it's I'm trying to make it really to squeeze it. But because for a long time I had this wish that I want to make film in Afghanistan. I want to make film in Afghanistan. But then because I was teamed up with the European crew, and then with the European producer, and then we reached the point that okay, we care about this film and it's very important to make it, but it doesn't worth our life. So it doesn't make sense that we take all the European crew to Afghanistan to make a film there. So we said, okay, we're gonna create Afghanistan. And then if you were asking me like 10 years ago, what do I think about remaking Afghanistan in somewhere else? I would like, this is a bullet on the head, never, ever, I will never do this. But now, because of my collaboration with Europe, I really, really believe and trust on the power of fiction film. I have the best DOP who is European, I have the best editor who is French, European, my producer is the best producer on the earth, you know, like, and I really learn a lot about how I can use the creativity that is, I mean, it is from France or it is about Denmark or Europe, you know, how I can get these things from different people and put it in my head and mix it with my ideas, and the outcome is coming something that is, it can be Afghan film, but it also can be an international film. And I wanted to tell one thing else, which I forgot, but yeah.
Well, I guess while I'm trying to wrap it up, you can still think about the final idea you had here. But I mean, the best name is probably empowerment to you, though. The idea that, again, powered through European crews, can be production crews, can be staff, it can be talents. Then, at the end of the day, a film is made happen.
I remember it.
There you go.
Yes. Because, you know, like...
I bought you time.
Yes. You know, like, I think this is... And now I'm saying about my case, but I guess this can be applied also to other filmmakers. That, for example, when I was in Afghanistan, I was very emotional about talking about Afghanistan. And I wanted to talk about Afghanistan in the way that I think it looked right to me. But then, because I was in Afghanistan, and I was surrounded with so many stories and dramas and a lot of things, I was like this. Like talking about Afghanistan, like, you know, I was just looking in front of my feet. And by working with Europe, I could get this sense of my country and looking from far and seeing the things that I could not be able to see if I was shooting with Afghan crew in Afghanistan. Now, before I was thinking that it is a weak point that I'm not shooting my film in Afghanistan. But now I think as a strength point that I have the possibility of living two lives. One character of me when I live in Afghanistan and I gather and capture all these stories from here and there, and I live the life and I'm involved with this everyday life and all these stories. And one character is when I am talking in English and I am traveling outside of Afghanistan and I'm collaborating with different people, with different talent from all over Europe and working with my producer. So it gives me really this power that I put these two characters of me in one and make something that I can be proud of it.
Carla?
I totally agree with that. Actually, I think that I studied at the London Film School, and I was teamed up with people from all over the world, and it was there exactly in London when I realized what I really wanted to tell and what stories I wanted to tell. And maybe because I was far from home and I was missing my place and my family, I said, I just want to talk about my family and my country and my place. And it was from there that I could see that, and that I feel I found my stories. And now I'm back in Barcelona, but this thing about traveling and staying always surrounded by people from all over the world, it's what makes you value your own background and what makes you unique. And I think that it is when it comes to tell local stories that then they can be universal.
So let's say also that European creation gives you a superpower of ubiquity for some reason. Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing your perspective and story with us on this very stage. Big round of applause, please, for you two incredible filmmakers.
Thank you so much.
So we actually dove into a very fast perspective on European talents, which is on words actually of filmmakers. Now let's give the mic to producers, if you may, for the next minute. Laurence Lascary, she's the producer for De l'autre côté du Périph. Antonia Nava, producer for Neo Art Producciones. Marco Kimens, producer for Catalaya, and Nicolas Nikitin, the country delegate for the Berlinale, are about to join us on stage. Grab a seat and a mic so we can actually enter the discussion. Of course, it's going to be about fostering the rise of European talents, but with this very different perspective, though. When you're a producer, what do you look first at when it comes to just trying to find a talent? Then how do you foster this talent? How do you engage with it? How do you team up with those talents? And probably the first question might actually be for Laurence Lascary. Actually, how does the process for the emergence of talents impact the stories you're actually bringing to screens?
Is it okay for me to speak in French?
If you may, yeah, sure. Okay. Let's go on.
Thank you.
And this actually gives me the opportunity to tell you that if you need translation headsets, they are available at the very entrance of this room, and that you have to leave your badge to get actually the headsets, but don't worry, you definitely not forget to get your badge when you're walking out of the room, right? So Laurence, the floor is yours in French.
Merci. Alors, pour répondre à cette question, comment dire, le fait d'encourager les talents émergents va avoir un impact sur les histoires qui vont être racontées. C'est vrai que, pour parler de mon parcours, moi j'ai une société qui s'appelle De l'autre côté du Périph. Donc, ça veut déjà dire un certain nombre de choses en termes de vocation et d'envie de mettre à l'écran des histoires qui vont refléter une plus large diversité de la société française. Et justement, je pense que pour permettre si on regarde...
Sorry.
Ah, je vous en prie. Si on regarde son pays dans un contexte plus global, je pense qu'il y a une demande aussi de cette pluralité, parce que qui parle de talents émergents parle aussi de pluralité des récits, pluralité des imaginaires, et on a besoin de pouvoir mettre à l'écran tout type d'histoire, parce que sinon c'est aussi la fin d'une culture, c'est la fin d'un attrait pour telle cinématographie. Et moi, ça me tient à cœur. Je vois ça aussi en termes d'opportunités business, tout simplement, de pouvoir arriver avec des histoires qui vont se différencier de ce qui se fait habituellement. Donc, encourager les talents émergents, c'est encourager la jeunesse et c'est encourager la diversité. Et à terme, si on est pragmatique, c'est une manière aussi d'aller capter, d'aller rechercher le public.
So if I sum it up, diversity is definitely a question of opportunities. And even if you're being just a little bit pragmatic, though, it also means business at some point. And I actually do remember a fact and figure from the American Guild Award, I think, or Guild Screen. It was definitely about Black Panther, and this fact and figure was stating the fact that, again, the more diverse a cast is, the more it actually attracts audiences. So, of course, diversity is an opportunity to tell better stories and to do more business. Just a quick reaction with you guys about this question of diversity and how it impacts the way you're going to actually form a cast or mix and match a cast together to, again, tell better stories to your audiences. Do you have a take on this? Not really? Ha!
Hello. Well, thank you for inviting me. First of all, I totally agree. I mean, it makes diversity sense also business-wise. So you can take it as a moral, ethical position. Be idealistic about it, but also business-wise. And I think especially now, with respect with the huge wave of television series, I think a large part of the audience want to say new things, new faces, and they're ready for it. And we in our company, we've done it with the cast. It wasn't exactly diversity, but we did employ a lot of young talents that were unknown, both on almost 10 years ago, Romanzo Criminale, but also on Gomorrah. Most of the actors were totally unknown, and you find talents where you go. Some of them barely speak Italian, and they speak their own local dialect, but actually that is good because Gomorrah isn't in Neapolitan, very tight Neapolitan dialect. It goes subtitled in the rest of Italy. And it is true, and I think this it makes sense to make it as a deliberate attempt to diversify, not just to let it happen if it happens. Yeah.
And it's also a good point when it comes to local, from local to global type of successes. Gomorrah is one of them. Giuseppe was stating also My Brilliant Friends.
Sorry,
which
it's Giuseppe.
Oh, thank you. Now I know actually how to pronounce this. Thank you very much, Marco.
No, sorry, I'm making fun of Giuseppe. It is Giuseppe.
Diversity, right?
But I was waiting for you to say that because I think we should call him Giuseppe from now on.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Actually, Nicolas, is diversity one crucial fact you're actually trying to curate better when you're looking for new stories and movies for Le Berlinale? I'm trying to say Berlinale, but
yeah,
sometimes
Berlinale. It's Nikolai, but I'm not going to go into this discussion.
Really?
No, don't worry. It's a complicated name. So first of all, I want to say thank you for having me, and I have to say officially, danke Dieter, to my beloved boss who is living the Berlinale, as you know, after a wonderful year. So let's give him a good round of applause, because after all, he's also the godfather of the media program. I'm moving on with him, but I had the honor to work especially with Eastern European directors, and we really had some, I think huge success stories full of diversity. I remember we had a short film in 2003. It was a Slovenian production, but it was a Serbian director telling basically a story about the whole conflict in former Yugoslavia. The film ended up having the Golden Bear. It ended up having the European Film Award. It was Oscar nominated, and then it was so easy for this young director coming out of Serbia, where let's say an average salary is 200 euros, to move on very fastly to do his first feature film, which was then of course a big European co-production with Austria, Slovenia, Serbia and Germany involved. Talking, let's say, about my part of the world, there's maybe you said one word to come up with something in the discussion before. I think what specializes and what makes our cinema so strong is really this political responsibility, that young filmmakers having, especially female filmmakers. I just want to mention Jasmila Spanic in 2006. She won with the first feature film, which is a low-budget production, The Golden Bear. She went back with this award, and this award and the recognition of the film changed the local politics in Bosnia, because all of a sudden 20,000 women who were were not acknowledged as victims of the war, got acknowledged, got pension. So I think this we always have to keep in mind, how a strong film can actually be a weapon against the political thing going on. You know, since a couple of days with all our friends in Austria, we discussed, I just read you the scenario. I mean, I think this is a great script. Young Russian woman plus Ibiza plus vodka, Red Bull, and already, you know, politics are changing in Austria to the good. Let's not underestimate the responsibility we can have and how strong, you know, the visual image can be if it can be used in the right way. And I think there's a lot of example like this of young talents who then, of course, on the other side need our support, need especially the support of the European Union and all the programs, because I have to say that the budget in the country of origin are, first of all, very, very limited. So you have to keep in mind that if we take away Poland maybe as a big capacity country, none of the films can be made only with the means from that country. Plus, of course, and I don't need to go into politics talking about Hungary or Poland, most of the really interesting films are not supported. We remember what happened with Ida, basically. Polish television showed the film, having a discussion before, saying whatever you're going to see in this film is pure fiction, nothing happens. So even if there are very strong comments coming from the country officials sometimes try to change it. And I think this is where the responsibility, especially of big festivals, come in, you know, like to protect them, to nourish them, and especially give them also the possibility, you know, to meet each other and to meet, let's say, the right partners from bigger countries like Germany, France, as example.
But actually, I mean, you're totally right, but festivals can be just safe harbors when it comes to those super crucial works when it comes to changing the political mindset through storytelling. There's also platform for that. And actually, Antonia, you've been experiencing being a scriptwriter and a producer for both type of screens. From your perspective now, where are the talents? Are they still sticking to the pure film industry, or are they tainted by the devil's advocate and switching more and more to platforms? And I know that some of you also have great anecdotes and stories about talents and platforms, though.
I think someone that is going to speak very highly about platforms, and I really welcome them into our lives. There's obviously the up and down ends on this point, but say, for example, I live in Spain. Platforms have created a solid business in my country because linguistically we are like 600 million people. So this is a spread immediately, talent coming and crossing from Argentina to Spain to Mexico, actors, all sort of talent, you know, from writers to crew members and it's allowed young talent to find new opportunities. Because only a few years ago, at least in my country, film funds were cut by the government badly. So many companies disappear and hardly had opportunities to make films. It was tough. Still is tough, but with the platforms coming into our lives, I think, especially the young filmmakers, will have an easier path. That's my point of view.
So it's kind of egg or chicken question, but who's fostering the talent? The screens, the opportunities? What is the best argument right now to actually attract a talent to produce its work? Or is or her work, actually? Anyone who wants to actually jump in the conversation is welcome to do so.
I like jumping, so... well, look, first off, here we're talking about talents, and I think we mean screenwriters mostly, aren't we?
Screenwriters, performers, authors, filmmakers, any type of European talents.
Look, this huge, again, demand for an offer for television series has made the role of screenwriters very, very central. There is no doubt about it. Where do we find them? That's the main issue. It's very complicated because already starting from how the schools in most of Europe, and in Italy for sure, are set up, they are very academic. They are very often not very practical. And there is still the ancient distinction between body and soul and matter and spirit. And so very often the screenwriters know everything about the history of Italian cinema, world cinema. They don't know exactly the nuts and bolts of how to fix a bad script when you have to go next week in production, and which makes them very for them very difficult to become a showrunner in the American sense of the word. They know virtually nothing about physical production. Then, of course, it's great and it's fantastic for them to define themselves as showrunner, because it's a very cool word. Who doesn't want to be a showrunner? But actually, the person who runs the show in Europe, and I'm speaking about continental Europe mostly, UK is different as usual. There are very few head writers with producing skills that can actually run the show. So you have whom? Not a director, as we have in feature films, because the director cannot have a coherent vision of the whole series, because very often he does 2, 3, maximum 4 episodes. Doing 8 or 10 episodes is very, very tough. So who do you have? The producer. And I think the showrunner in most of European shows is actually the creative producers that is the person that has a coherent version. So then where do you find talent? So starting with writers, you try to get them from people that are kind of, yes, they've gone to school, they've done some series already for public broadcasters and etc., but they have kind of been feeding themselves a very, very strong diet of American series or Scandi series, or Israeli series. I'm talking about series where there is a highest level of complexity narratively. And sometimes you find the talent that is willing to twist things, make them more complex, and to do them rapidly. Some of the older, more established writers are gone. You can't use them anymore because they have been they're accustomed to work on a type of narrative where for the public broadcasters or the general broadcasters, with the average audience is 60, 65, and where the editorially they have been ordered over the last 30 years to make things clear, to explain. And now some of them are irrecuperable, unfortunately, although fantastically still good for sometimes for the mainstream drama. And then you have surprise from the young ones. Some of the young ones are fantastic, but there isn't like a natural conduit between school and business. This is a very, very big issue, I think, as far as Italy is concerned, and I think Europe is concerned.
So I do understand the lines have been blurred, if I do hear it clearly, between the parts that actually a talent can play in the process of the show or of the film. What does it offers in terms of perspective, both to you, Nicolas, and Laurence and Antonia, if you want to jump into the conversation too?
Je voulais rebondir sur ce que disait Giuseppe, parce que c'est vrai que...
C'est Marco.
Marco, pardon,
alors, je sais
excusez-moi.
que c'est... Voilà, alors c'est un peu compliqué aujourd'hui sur cette scène.
Vous m'avez appelé Giuseppe.
Vous m'avez troublé.
Désolé,
Marco.
Giuseppe, c'est un bon nom. On a Giuseppe Verdi dans l'histoire de la musique italienne.
Désolé, Marco.
Mais Marco, on a seulement Marco Polo.
C'est bien, on a le même en français, ça va être plus facile. Donc, ce sur quoi je voulais rebondir, c'est que c'est vrai qu'en France, on a également ce type de paradoxe. C'est que à la fois... pour des auteurs qui vont être plus juniors, plus émergents, souvent le processus d'écriture va être plus long, il va falloir ressortir des versions et des versions. Seulement, comment dire, le budget qu'on va leur donner
And the
pour
budget
l'écriture, ça va.
that they're given will be the same, however. So how can we make this viable for the authors? That's a real problem. And there are lots of discussions in France amongst scriptwriters at the moment where we say that scriptwriters are not good enough, they're not properly trained. We're not good at writing scripts, but they're not given the necessary conditions to allow them to devote themselves to a given project for a given lapse of time. And that would give them an opportunity. And then we'd get the scripts more quickly and we could finance them better. It's something of a paradox. And then the scriptwriters who have been successful, who are gifted and who become recognized and acknowledged, they will take on lots of projects at the same time. And then we'll also have problems. So there'll be a kind of backlog in the pipeline, and they won't be able to give us priority any longer. So concerning the showrunner, we haven't got this notion of showrunner. And often the authors of different series will feel dispossessed of their project, which is a shame, because when you go to the production house, the director will take over the project, and sometimes it'll be cut up, there'll be no longer any connection. And there's also a risk, therefore, of denaturing and missing things which could have been interesting for the integrity of the project.
Je repasse au français. No, just to follow up with Laurence, and then we'll wrap up and go back to English, though.
We'll go back to English later. Isn't there a kind of risk? On the one hand, we say, great, we're giving priority to the young authors, except that we sometimes see that we've got to have more strength and we've got to support them. Or when we go in and find authors who've got some experience behind them, the trouble is they've got so much work and we can't keep them for oneself. So what is the real argument, which means that we'll be able to keep talents to yourself? Which talents? Which talents? The ones you want. We're talking about young talents today. The real challenge from the point of view of the producer is to detect talents, people who've got a potential. How do we do this? Well, this means going to festivals, going to meet young people. I was at the Festival of Scriptwriters in Valence, and there was a marathon. They had to write scripts in 48 hours. And this is where we can see what the talents can produce when they're under pressure through their universe and through their imagination. So festivals are very important. And what I do very often, because I work with emerging authors and talents, when I have a project, I don't want to sign a blank check. When you sign for a contract for a scriptwriter, it commits you. And it's very, very complicated to be able to pursue a project and to sack a scriptwriter. It's very complicated. And what we try to do to avoid these risks, when we've got an order, we go and challenge different authors. We present them a challenge, we give them a document, we give them a pitch, a page, a few lines, and we say, this is our view of the project, this is what we'd want to do. What does this inspire in you? We want an adaptation. How would you adapt this? And so in one page or two, they give us a proposal, and this is what allows us to give young people an opportunity. But it's not easy on the market. When you commit to a young people, you have to defend their idea, or you have to get a sufficiently strong idea to overcome the problem of the writer being a youngster.
Different perspective.
Absolutely.
But, there has never been in the history of mankind a period where so many television series have been produced. So this is the best moment ever to be a young writer. And of course, Laurence is totally right. As a young writer, unless you come up with your own material that you write spec, meaning nobody commissioned that, unless you do that, you have to consider yourself lucky if you're part of a writing team, whether it's a writing room or a writing team, and try to emerge there. And yes, it's sad. Initially, you're not paid much. But I'll tell you, the producers and all the creative execs are always on the lookout for the new emerging screenwriters because we badly need them. And so there has never been a moment like this where young writers, if they're good, even in the hierarchy of the writing room, they're at the bottom, but there is always somebody who's going to say, oh, he's good, that's good. I'm going to let him write another episode. And the next time, maybe he'll be not the top writer, but not the bottom, will be the second writer. So I think that it's always been a process, but very often this process has been blocked by a category of 50-year-old men. And be a young writer, forget about being a young female writer, was very, very hard. I don't think that it's a little bit like that, still like that, but it's changing, and it's changing very fast. So my recommendation, if nobody asked me to give a recommendation, but it is, first off...
What is your recommendation, Marco?
I have two. Thank you. And it's Giuseppe, don't forget that. And it's, first off, if you're a writer, you feel you're a talent, meaning you're talented, not just a talent as a definition in the vocabulary. Write your own stuff. As Laurence said, write your own presentation. I mean, now young writers are also very proficient with, doing presentation. Write it and submit it to producers. And you will find today agents that are willing to represent you because if you are a young woman writer or director, that's never been like that. If you talk to any American agent, as you know, they all have been fired by their writers now because of the dispute. But they tell you, confidentially, that's never been so bad if you have a 40 or 50-year-old man, even established writer, to push them around. However, if you have a young woman, that's a different thing. If you have a minority, that's fantastic. So this is the good moment. So first recommendation, write your own stuff. Don't expect necessarily to be paid for it. Write your own stuff, be creative about it, be daring, and shop it around. And second, accept with a certain degree of realism the fact that the first series, the second series, will not be paid much, but at least you're part of the process. You understand the process. And if you have talent, somebody today will see that you have talent and you will grow.
Fantastic time for talents, Nicolas.
Absolutely, but let's go back and what makes a talent. It's
Sure.
the possibility to study, and especially in our sector to see. So the biggest threat, because I assume a lot of people are here can change and ensure our cultural future, is still to really keep the cinemas alive, because all directors we know, all scriptwriters we know, they only got into the sector because they saw film on a big screen. I think this we really need. Somebody just watching on this little one will never have this passion. And covering 33 countries, I always see, of course, differences in countries like Georgia, where I'm a lot. They have such a rich history. All the young directors, they do two things. They know the history, they reflect on this cinematic history, plus, of course, they reflect on what's going on in the country and, show us as a mirror of society. That's why Romanian, Polish cinema is just so strong. I think we have to invest also a lot in Europe still in the professionalization valorization of the crafts. You know, I mean, Polish Lodz Film School is famous because all the good Hollywood DOPs are from there, because they still shoot on 35 mil. So even the youngest students really know what it means. In Lithuania, they have the best probably sound person in Europe. I think this is still missing. I just want to put everything away only from the writers, sorry, because it's collaborative work. So we have also to ensure, you know, for the DOPs, for the sound people, for the editors, especially, you know, really the possibility to study, and I think to study more also cross-border and do more, you know, also between young people, this kind of cross-border collaboration.
Antonia, actually, so we're talking about this amazing time again for young talents. Everyone is hunting, literally, for them and craving and praising them to join the team and the projects. You actually made it as a successful screenwriter and with a great career. And I was just thinking, what do you think about the way that now talents are being chased by those incredible companies and studios? Would you love to be in their position right now?
I think so. I need to say yes. Again, because it's been tough for them. What I also feel is that, and I agree with most of what my colleagues are saying here, but also there is the need of implementing development. That doesn't mean, because some people might jump into, okay, one television series, the other, their salaries will grow, etc. But we still see a number of undeveloped scripts. And the reason why is because probably there's not enough being done in terms of education or at schools or in, you know, in a country-by-country basis at implementing that. So it's a very good time, but also to write a good script and to come up with a good feature series requires research, investigation, and knowledge of the subject from a very early age. I think it was Carla Simon that mentioned, you know, this program at schools where maybe film is introduced as a new subject, apart from mathematics, literature, or whatever, and that will, I think, ultimately develop better and better writers that are totally prepared to do, you know, create diversity and new, you know, content.
And if you do have a question or reaction to our panelists, it's going to be about time, actually, to raise your hands as you're doing right now so that you can be given a mic to join the conversation, too.
Thank you. I'm Cécile Desprin from the Society of Audiovisual Authors. I'm a bit surprised that there is no talent on the panel to participate to the discussion. And I would like to ask a question to Marco, for example, because you insisted on asking talent to write their own stuff, their own stories, sorry. Don't you think that now that it's, as you see, an atmosphere of production, lots of opportunities, that it's time to develop some rules also for talents to be fairly paid? Rules like, for example, having a part of the budget that is dedicated to talent as a rule on any project, that the money that is going to writing and directing the creative people on a project, that it's proportional to the budget so that we all share the risk in production. Don't you think that taking into account the all public money that is invested in the audiovisual sector, there should be some rules like that?
Cecile, you know the answer. The answer is no. I don't think that was the right way forward at all. And I think that the moment you create some form of subsidized, although modern, link to the budget, it's the moment where you lessen the process of meritocratic process in screenwriting, which is what we need, what the European industry needs to compete with the American industry. So no, I don't think that's absolutely is the right forward. However, I believe, and I see that daily, When I follow contracts, there are bid and negotiations, and what I see is that the prices for writers, young, middle-aged, old, whatever, they're constantly growing. So, and the number of writers involved is growing exponentially. So I think there isn't a rule, because you don't want writers to become slaves, of course. So I think that some of the American SAG, SAG rules can actually be looked at with favor in terms of how many drafts you want to, as a producer, you can legitimately obtain. But I think that in the end, there also needs to be a consensual approach. So no, I don't think so. And you know what I think also about the fact that, which is a very important point for your association, is to believe that writers are underpaid regularly as a norm, and because of that, they need to be entitled to further remuneration linked to the distribution of product. I think that also something that should be left to the market, and in looking at what the market is today, the negotiating leverage of writers has never been bigger. So I think you can obtain those things for the writers that are in demand. You should not be able to just impose those things to anybody, likewise for actors, for directors, and for producers. Producers, when they're young producers, their first production, they make very little money, and they risk some of their remuneration. So I think we need to just keep it as a market-oriented industry that will make us all better.
Thank you very much. I think we had a second question over there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting panel discussion. My name is Marina Naumova. I am from Russia, and I'm running the agency named Max. I am, it's only I am in this agency, focused on film packaging and co-production. And I was about to add the line talent management, but I decided not to do this because my question is, what do you think about the talent management system? Because I get a couple of meetings here with these beautiful companies who are reading scripts and raising the money, or the sales companies. And they just, when they saw my visit card, they just mentioned that it is all these big agencies, CA, UTA, now they are mostly not focusing on talent management anymore. So we in Russia don't have this kind of system. And Marco, yes, you've mentioned a lot of sentence you said really reflected, pardon for my English, it's very clear because I was working as a screenwriting agent in the biggest, oldest, 10 years in Russia screenwriting agency. There are 2 agencies in Russia at all, and I was focused on the young talents, screenwriters mostly, just from the movie schools, and per year I bring into the industry about 15 or 20 talents. I'm super proud of that. They are still in industry, but the point is that producers are not really focused on developing talents. Mm-hmm. They are focusing to raise money, to sell the movies and all that stuff. As I see, but young producers from Russia with whom I'm working with, they understand how important to working with the talent who, for example, been selected in Invasion. Now the industry. It's more shaped. So my question is, what about talent management system? Is it right now in Europe? Is it working? Is it How do you think is it possible to share the experience in the less developed industry? Is in our country. Am I clear?
In all honesty, I'm not sure I understood the the question, but I understood a lot of the issues that you brought up, and they keep on bubbling up in every conversation. So I'll try to be as quick as possible. First off, as you know, agents in America, under a California law, cannot produce. So that's why some of the best agents in time, Martin Scorsese's agent, for instance, became a manager. So I'm saying that just because they can. The boundary has been relaxing over the years, and so that's why major talent agencies have set up their own production or financing entities. I'm thinking WME, William Morris Entertainment, Endeavor has set up Endeavor Content, etc. And of course, there's been a lot of awkwardness about it, but also then you talk to these people there and you find extremely competent, motivated people. And so sometimes it's not bad to team up with them. Yet, this has created now a backlash, including the package deal, the package commission they get. So now all the SAG writers, the WGA writers have fired their agents. And if you talk to any American agent, they are not actually in touch with them anymore. The European system is so different, and there is nothing, is less regulated, and in many ways, however, less professional. And I want to say something to Cecile again. Cecile, a lot of writers, you know and I know, are not good writers. But let me tell you one thing. Many producers suck. They're really bad. So when we say, how can we develop good scripts? You need a good writer, but more importantly, you need a good producer that has the ability to guide a young writers towards the right narrative choice. So give him or her freedom, but within certain guidelines. This relationship between producer, writers, and agents is crucial. And that's where very often our industry or some of our projects fall apart. So I think that is I think we need a higher degree of professionalism in all our three legs of the industry. Otherwise, you cannot really push for our meritocratic agenda. A lot of managers or agents in Europe are, shall we say that, they improvise themselves as such. And it's a tough business. You got to know about the history of cinema, you got to know about psychology, you got to know about business, international business, you need to know how to make contracts. It's a very tough business. You need to know how to nurture and console and reproach talents. I don't see many that do that. And producers, I don't want to defend the category. There are a lot of people that also now with this huge wave of, they just are, we don't know where to come from, from a different business. So, yeah, I hope somewhere in this I reply to your question.
Thank you very much. We do have time for a third and last question, if there is one popping up. 1, 2, 3, no more questions, sure? We do have a question here, second row.
Hi, this is Himanshu. I have currently come to Paris for 2 years. I'm doing my MBA, but I'm from India, worked in Indian film industry for 10 years. Can you, in brief, kind of go through the process of a co-production or a film being made here? Because you guys are talking about talent, writers. I'm a bit, maybe in the sense where a lot of talk is happening in the sense about talent agency. So if there was an Afghan filmmaker who was talking, okay, I had a European producer, and she wanted to, first if someone asked her that can we shoot an Afghan-based film outside, and she would say no. And now she is so happy having a French editor, having a DOP who's like one of the best DOPs for her. So if I have an idea, I want to make a film. So
reach out to a European producer.
Yeah. So,
there's plenty in this room, though. So I guess you'll have time for networking afterwards and ask the question. But to sum up in like 1 minute
short.
about the
Yeah,
wow,
exactly.
that is going to be quite an achievement if
a
you guys can
synopsis,
make
one-liner,
it.
log line.
How do we make films in Europe? Wow, in 1 minute.
Get drunk at the right bar with the right people, and everything will happen automatically. It's
I
very
wouldn't say-
easy.
It's called
I've
the
seen
Cannes
it
Film
so
Festival,
often.
basically.
It's called either this or co-production markets. You just have to go to forums. There's so much possibilities in Europe where you meet the people who will make it possible. Believe me, it's
I wouldn't say
nothing is
making
more
of the
easier
film,
than
just
that.
the pre-production. How to start your script to the start level, that you have got those people in, and
Okay,
now
back
it's
to
If
the
you
basics.
wrote something, find an agent.
perfect. Thank you.
Get someone to represent you. I will never, read your stuff if it doesn't come from an agent. Because I think that if you haven't been able to get an agent, there is already something wrong with you. Not with you personally, you're great, of course. We all know that.
So it's still about trust in the end of the day, right?
You have to believe that, in some cases there is a trust in the system. And also there is very good agents. If somebody, a very good agent, comes to you and says, you have never heard of this young woman from, I don't know, we have a person that works with us, and that is fantastic. It's a young writer that is now working as and you never heard of him, but he's going to win an award soon as a young screenwriter. And you say, okay, it's a good talent. And then you read the stuff. So we got him on board. He did win the award. And so it's a good entry point.
I mean, just to add this, I think it's also a lot about branding and reputation. So working for Berlin, biggest festival in the world, everybody assumes if you have a film, no matter in which section, feature, documentary, short, you have talent, right? Because you went through such a long pre-selection process. So for the short films, 5,000 film apply, some 30 are taken for main competition, and then for generation, some other 20, so 50. So you can do the math. And I think it's the same thing what Marco is saying. You have to go through a lot of instances. You have to convince people if you're bankable or if you're credible, and then it goes on the next step. But this is research, young men. Just, go in the internet and find all those people are online and easy to reach.
And again, they're probably going to be here for the cocktail upcoming at the very end of all those conferences. So if I do sum it up, and it was a great way to actually bring us to the conclusion of this panel here, it's still about trust, it's still about reputation. Again, there is no such thing as a recommendation algorithm when it comes to talents, or we're far from it. And still, we heard about these miracle stories about young talent spurring or looming from nowhere and making it to the screen. So I think we have to mix and balance our perspective on the search for talent. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, though, for your pros and cons and perspective on the story.
Thank you.
And while you're being released from duty on this very stage, we're about to welcome another filmmaker who actually made it big time to screens and multiple screens at the same time. I'm going to try to pronounce his name. I hope I won't be wrong this time. Gustav Müller. Made it?
That's the correct
Okay.
French pronunciation.
Let's say it works. And Gustav, we're super happy to have you with us today because actually you are that type of miracle we're talking about, like this one filmmaker with one idea and great idea because it was all based on sounds that actually made his very first film an incredible success. I'm talking about Guilty. For those who don't know yet what Guilty is all about, can you just sum it up super quickly?
Super quickly. Well, the super short pitch is that it's a real-time thriller that takes place in a 911 dispatch center in Copenhagen. And it's a film that tries to play with sound in order to bring the audience all over Denmark, all the way we're in one location. Yeah.
And it actually, it's a mix and match also of many different things that happened to you while you were developing the idea. One of your producer, Lena, who will be joining us for the next panel, you actually met her at school, if I'm not mistaken. And you trained, or no, actually you were totally financed by the Danish Film Institute. So it's 100% Danish team that made this success happen. What does it mean about our European ability to actually make talent grow?
Well, I feel that I come from a very privileged position. I'm from Sweden. I went to film school in Denmark, where I met basically the whole crew of the film. Not only my producer, but also my co-writer, the DOP, and the editor of this film. We went to the same year at film school. So we got 4 years together where we could develop a common understanding of the film language. So when we went out and did our first feature right after school, we shot it a year after we graduated, we had already trained for years in a common understanding, you know. And yeah, it was financed by New Danish Screen. That's a part of the Danish Film Institute that finances first and second time filmmakers. And it's low budget, but what's great about them, I think, is that they basically they finance talent and not necessarily idea. They look at emerging filmmakers and film students and try to see, do we believe in you? So they had a lot of support from us from a very early stage. I basically played them a YouTube clip with a sound clip of a 911 call, and we explained to them the idea. And from that point, they gave us a lot of development money just to go and write it. And yeah, so it's a super privileged situation, I would say, yeah.
But again, low budget type of projects usually make the most beautiful miracle stories about films. Again, just because with that small amount of money, you've been able to foster and grow together this amazing project and actually reach out to audiences you never thought about before actually putting the work on screen. So now, when you're thinking about maybe the next project, and we'll probably get back to Guilty in a few seconds now, but when you're thinking about next project, what do you think? Bigger budget, or do you want to keep it low just for the reason that, yeah, you can make it happen this way?
Well, I would want a little bit more money in order to be able to shoot in more than one room the next time, but
maybe you can get specialized on this one room type of movie.
But it is really, we have really worked since we made The Guilty with the next idea to try and find new boundaries. And I don't think a boundary needs to be a budget, but I really believe that boundaries enhance, at least for me, creativity. And I think it's something that helps. If you set up a certain limitation, I think it helps you as a filmmaker making something more unique. And you're forced to not just take the obvious choice in your storytelling. But I don't think that has to be budget. I think like Dunkirk is a film with a bunch of limitations and constraints with a bigger budget. So it doesn't have to be money, but I think I'm always going to be looking for it in some sense, yeah. From
constraints comes opportunities, right? Again, if you do have to think about the next movie you're about to bring to audiences, I had the very same question with Carla and Shahrbanoo, by the way, but it's really about sky's the limit. Like, we as European filmmakers, are we actually trying to learn from all genres all over the place, or do you think we tend to limit ourselves to this one type of what is so-called European movies?
Well, I don't know. You know, when we have screened The Guilty, I've been to a lot of different places in the world screening that film, and people refer to it's a very European film. But actually, like all oral references were American 70s film. So I'm not so sure that I see the films that I'm making in Europe being European because they reflect European culture, but like European films versus American films versus Asian films, I think that it's a more fluid lines between storytelling structure now than it has been before, because they're equally accessible all over the world.
And there probably also a more equal education from audiences to actually learn about the way to make films abroad and globally. Now, if we do go back to Guilty, there's an exciting project going on. You actually made it global, and there is a remake on its way with American producers, probably Jake Gyllenhaal, I've heard.
Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal's production company has bought the rights for the US remake, and he's producing and starring in it, yeah.
And still, you guys managed to remain co-producers and executive co-producers of the American version.
Yeah, me and Lena, the producer, were executive producing it, and yeah.
So I know we can dive that deeper into the creative process, because it's actually happening right now as we're speaking, and the project is being developed in the US at the same time. But do you still see some differences between European way to make films and American way to make films and creativity at the same time? Probably not, because we're also mix and matching Asian and American and European films a few seconds ago.
Yeah, I mean, I have never tried making a film in the States, so I couldn't tell. But from what I've gathered visiting the United States, I would say the privilege and the absolute power for me about Europe that you don't really see anywhere else is that there is finances supporting these films where the main interest is not making money. And I think that gives an opportunity to take more risks, basically. And I think the higher the risk, the higher the reward. And that way we can get films that might not make sense on paper, but they might come out a fantastic film, you know? Yeah.
And managing, again, to be still in charge of the executive process, is it a question of also being able to manage the creativity part of it? Like, it's super crucial for you to be part from this American project by design, to make sure that actually what you tried to come across with Guilty, with the very first movie to audiences, is still being made as a point in the American version?
I feel that I had 100% creative power when we made our film, and I think it's important for them to make their film, and I think it's important that they make an American film about it. There are a lot of themes that the Guilty deals with. It's set in Europe, it's set in Denmark, it's set in a functioning, in a lot of ways, functioning society where tragedy still happens. And if you would move, you can't just move that story to the United States, because it's a dysfunctional society in a lot of ways. The film deals with police brutality. You can't talk about police brutality in the same way in Denmark and in the United States. So I feel that it's important that they do not the same thing that we did, but something else with it. Yeah.
Again, in the previous panels, we dove into this idea that being a talent right now is such a great time. Do you see the leverage you have as a young filmmaker while trying to meet with production teams?
I don't know, for me it's just important to write a script that I'm happy with, and that's my number one challenge. I think I'm, but I definitely, in regards to the streaming and all those things you talked about before, I think it is great for a new talent that there are more opportunities, yeah.
And finally, of course, you're just at the very beginning of, we hope, a very successful career. What are the next steps when it comes to, again, telling better stories to wider audiences, maybe younger audiences too? Do you tend to limit yourself to this one screen in theater, or do you think broader, like every screen can be a playground for you to, again, foster better storytelling?
So you're talking about platforms now?
Probably.
The next film we're working on, I see as a film for the cinema. I would love to make things for VOD as well, but I think in some ways I would see that as having a different strength to it. So I think as a creator, I think I would look at the platform first, and I think that the VOD can do some things that cinema film cannot do, and the other way around. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank
and
you.
congratulations on the many projects on the table when it comes to the remake and when it comes to the next film. And now we're heading actually to the next discussion and final panel of this European Film Forum. We actually, again, talk about these talents, where to find them, but do they have what it takes to actually be European talents? We're going to talk about this very crucial question with Vinka Wiedemann. She's the director of the National Film School of Denmark. Lena Flynn, she's the producer for Spring, and she actually co-produced Guilty. Julie Bertuccelli, she's director, and Eric Goussens is a producer for Walking the Dog. So it's actually going to be about the three of you on the stage and not Julie, who couldn't make it apparently this afternoon, but there's a lot of you to actually try to define together what are the skills to be a talent and how do we actually get to foster them. Of course, we're talking about the crucial part of education. And Lena, when I do refer to the story you do share with Gustav, is definitely at school that you guys met and that you've been able to team up and actually begin the process of Guilty as a project. Is school the very first step we should look at while trying to curate talents?
Hello. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. Well, I think that definitely is a good place to start. At least at the Danish Film School, we had the great opportunity to spend a lot of time together. As Gustav talked about, getting a common language, film language, find the people that you share a vision with. But to start at a film school, you need to have a drive to actually want to do films. So I think it starts way before a professional film school. So yeah, I think it starts from the very beginning in the, what's it called? Folkeskole. What's that in English? Yeah, the elementary school, yeah.
And actually, so Vinka, you're the director of this National Film School of Denmark. Indeed, you're also a scriptwriter and you also a creative producer. So you're still actually teaching your students real life when it comes to the filmmaking process. What do you see in their eyes where they're actually applying for the National Film School of Denmark these days? Do you really see them craving to tell stories to audiences?
Yeah, I would say I don't see enough talent, I would say. We have very tough competition. But you asked before, what is European film about in one word? And I know what I think it should be. It should be diversity. So we have a big challenge all over Europe, I believe, in our recruitment processes for young filmmakers, young talent, in attracting talent from all over society and from all sexes and ethnicities and social classes and so on. So we're really happy with the talent we have at film school. And they're all dying to get in, and they all want to tell stories and are all afraid whether they can perform, and they're all searching for their own expression and for new expressions, and they're all eager to learn all kind of skills, but we don't see enough.
So again, we're talking about diversity at a very, very large type of scale, social diversity, gender diversity, and I guess also national diversity when it comes to mix and matching the entire state member inside and outside the European Union so that we can actually bring and join forces together. Just a quick question to you, Eric, as we do begin this discussion. Do you feel the same way when it comes to pure animation because animation is definitely your thing with walking the dog. Do you have the very same problems to actually look at, curate talents in the animation field?
Yeah, thanks for the invitation first. Also, I think when we talk about talents, it's the whole team. Because we talked about directors, we talked about scriptwriters, but for us, talents is an animator, compositor, lighter, a storyboarder. So this is talents for us. So we are working normally on an average with 100 to 120 people for 1.5 years. So it's a long marriage with them. So you have to be happy with each other. So not too much divorces. So for us, recruitment is this. Of course, there needs to be a concept, and of course, there needs to be a very good script. But I think this is a very, very essential element for us. And I agree with you that I think we heard today that talents don't have enough payments and talent have not enough work. But we as producers, or we as film schools, or you as film school, I don't have a film school, or as film funds, or as television channels, or as cinema owners, whatever, we know also that we only can bring something what is very good. And when you are at Cannes or Berlin, because I heard about you talking about Berlin, what is frustrating for me is, of course, there's so much people trying to get it. But we all know that something is very good, and something is a little bit good, and something is maybe not very good. So we need to be much more honest, you know, because there's too much output for the moment. There's a kind of inflation of projects. Everybody thinks about Netflix and Amazon, but at the same time, I think we have to be very prudent that we care for good stuff, and we care for the career also of a talent, because it's not interesting to motivate the director and then say, yeah, that's the first and the last one we work together because your film was good, but there's no future for you. So I think we have to have a more overall strategy for all those students in the school, be very selective for us as producers towards directors, because in an animation director, feature-length film, you know, that's very expensive genre, linked to what I said, they can make between 4 to 5 films during their life. And every film is 5 years, 6 years of work. So multiply 5 by 6, and you know how old he will be at the end. And so therefore I think, yes, talents are very important, but we really need to be very selective and to recruit somebody where there's a potential. And when you see, okay, there is something more than just one film. And this means sharing ideas, have a lot of talks with those people, following them. And if you go for a talent like today, I think Les Frères Dardenne are here with their 4th film. They're not so young anymore. But at the same time, there is something so they can deliver. So I think, yes, talents for us are very important, but my message is we need to be very selective.
Need to be very selective again, because it's a long-term relation. Do you feel the very same in the other genre, for instance, Lina?
If I feel
the very same way Eric feels about the animation industry, like you really have to choose super carefully the talents you want to teaming up with, just because you know that it's not going to be this one sparkle that, you know, makes it to the screen this one time, but probably, and it's what's happening from what I understand with Gustave here and the Guilty franchise. I hope it's going to be a franchise one day for you guys, but you really have, again, to get those talents from scratch, because then it's going to be a super long-term relation.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I actually choose the people that I want to work with before I choose a project, if that makes sense. It's like if I sense there is a connection and a vision and a talent and something that we are that we want to do together, that we want to tell the world together, then I decide on that relationship before the actual project. So I feel like I'm in a relationship with all the people that I work with, and it's both directors, writers, DOPs, editors, stuff, like the whole creative crew actually. So yeah, and I feel like we learn so much from every single project that we get, that we will take with us to the next project. And I feel that we should learn all the way through our careers and our lives. So it's a long journey, and I really like to think of it like that. And yeah, that's how I think about that.
Love, love, love. Well, actually, Vinka, are your talents and then the young filmmakers and screenwriters and script writers that you do prepare at the school, are they ready for the real world? Do they know all about this long-term process they will have to face while graduating from the National Film School of Denmark?
Well, who in here is prepared for the future? I think this is what we're facing, because we need to educate our students for a future that we don't know yet. And I think this is a big challenge for film schools, but also for mentors, talking about the mentoring initiative that will come up here, that the big challenge in being a mentor is if you only mentor from your own perspective of what you know, because we need to break new boundaries, and to get into storytelling that we didn't think was possible. So we are talking about new functions like showrunners. No one knows what a showrunner is or could be. So, or the next job function. So we need to prepare the students, not just for the young filmmakers, the talent, not just for specific skills that we know today, but to give them competences in order to be able to make a constant change and development. Just like you said, I think it was very beautifully put, we are on a journey that will be lifelong. So when we talk about nurturing talent and developing talent, we should talk about it just from elementary school, like you said, and up to the people who are actually professionals today, because they will be outdated tomorrow if they don't know how to transform and develop their competences. So that's extremely important that we look at this as a big ecosystem, and that we look at all talent within the whole crew. And then I have a special heart for the people who in the leading positions of a film crew. I think the EU and the media programs did a lot to professionalize producers and scriptwriters over the last decades. And I think actually the time has come to look at the role and function of directors, because I believe that they are the core of European film is actually directors getting access to raise their voice and to tell stories. But if we don't nurture that talent and challenge it to become professional within all the new ways of storytelling and collaborating, then we will lose the concept of directors, and it will all be taken over by scriptwriters, showrunners, and producers. And I love these people as well, but we still need directors. So this is for me the big message to the media Creative Europe. Please, let's challenge and professionalize our core artists, one of the core artists, the directors.
Which brings us back to the question of blurred lines between the so many different parts talents can actually play on a movie project or a film project or animation projects nowadays. But what I understand from what you were saying, guys, is definitely the fact that on the to-do list for skills to be a talent today, you definitely need agility. You need to be agile to actually face the world as we don't know it yet, because it's going to change a lot in the industry, and the industries are always under, changing type of mindset. But it's also a question of clarity. You need to actually know your skills and know your talent and know your truth, and not trying to pretend you're a talent just because it's cool to be a talent, right? So where do you actually find those people who have the agility and the clarity to actually take the job?
But I think we are now making the film of Ari Folman on Anna Frank, and there was one guy who was on another film before, and he said, okay, I think I can animate. I say, no problem. We do a test, a paid test. so it's not for free. And after 2 days and a half, he saw that it was not possible. So this is easy, you know. There's something can ask, okay, can you make a script? And you don't give him 2 days and a half, not enough, of course, but you give him a little bit more time. So we have the instruments to measure what somebody is able to do or not. If you want a very good DOP and then it's a photograph from a local shop pretending that he can make your film, then you say, okay, make a shot, let's see. So just to tell that there are instruments more and more available, and we have patience. But of course, you cannot be naive. And in this industry, we are talking about money. We are asking money for Creative Europe. We are asking money for Eurimage. We ask money for our film fund. So we have a responsibility as producers. We have something to deliver to a channel, to deliver to a sales agent, to a distributor. So there's something on our shoulders. And therefore, I agree that it's a very difficult job to be a producer because, in fact, you are a company owner. And you are a manager because you have to make fun when you make the film. So this means that you have to have a helicopter view over everything what's happening. And not only from the script writer, but the whole structure of the film. And so you have a company, an animation for 1 year and a half, sometimes 2 years long. And then you start up a new company. What is a new film? So, and every time you know that there is a kind of fee you have to pay to an animator. And we do it with friendship, we do it with some humor, but I think also young people have to understand that we cannot just play around with all those millions. An animation film is 10 million, 16 million, 7 millions, whatever. A short film is also sometimes very expensive. So we have to teach them also, not in the school, but in a collaborationship, that this is something what they need to do. This is something what they need to understand. And sometimes people are so naive that it is finished. So I think this is something that we learn them. Animation is quite young in Europe for the moment. America is, like, let's say, a little bit further up, like always. But we are growing all together. Creative Europe, producers, channels, everybody. And I think we learn from each other, all of us. And I think this is the message. If you have ears and eyes, then you can do a lot in a short time.
Lina.
Yeah, I really agree, but on the other hand, I feel like it's pretty important to give the chances to untrained, unschooled talent, because I think if we should move cinema forward or move it somewhere new, then we need to take the chances, and we need to take in a talent that is not been proven yet. And of course we can't do it in a 10 million euro budget, but then it's really important to keep supporting the low budget initiatives and the low budget films, because that's where we can give an untrained talent the chance to do something new.
But this is what we're doing. Maybe I was not expressing it clearly, but at the same time we do short movies with young people. Even in a feature-length film, we have juniors, mids, and seniors. A junior is somebody who has no experience, so he learns from the mid, and the mid learns from the senior. So we do it in every project, because this is, of course, our obligation to learn. But even a junior or even an intern at a certain moment needs to understand that we try to learn something. And so they have to keep their eyes and their ears open. For me, it's absolutely necessary, because there's a lack of talents in our business. Really. We were all nomads in the beginning, not me, I'm not an animator. So I think 10 years ago, an animator had maybe for 2, 3, 4 weeks work. Now, when I asked them, they are not free, because we share talents all over Europe, all the time. So we don't have a guarantee when we say we do a film that there will be enough talents. So we are trying to learn them, to form them, but within a certain system.
And we'll probably go back to the talent drain in the animation field in a few, but it definitely reminds me about the mentoring mindset you were talking about, Vinka, a few seconds ago.
Yeah, I just have a comment on this,
Sure.
because I think one thing, the good news is that talent is not static. So you know, in some areas you find suddenly a growing number of talent, and some populations are an enormous number of talents. I don't think it's because of genetics. I think it's because of different ways of relating to how to nurture and develop talent. So the good thing is that if we work strategically, we can actually expand the number of talents. But this means that we need to be strategic, and that's the other great thing about Europe, that we actually have the political structures to work strategically. So I find it really important to say that we are in an epoch of expansion. So when you need to expand on a big scale, which is what we need to have measures on all levels in the ecosystem. And mentorship is, of course, a quick fix. It's a quick fix to skills, to specific skills that you need to, transfer from one person to another. But we need to look at the broader competences, and I believe that entrepreneurial skills or competences are really important for actually practically all areas of the film crew, and because we are in the situation where a lot of people are not just getting hired for a film, they are supposed to invest in a film, or they are supposed to, on a very concrete, specific level, to add value to the film. So this is one thing. Another thing is leadership and collaboration competences, which has to do with the fact that we collaborate in complete new ways when we have new technologies, new platforms, and just talking about, like we did before, if you want to enter new platforms and new formats, you also enter new ways and new expectations for collaboration. So when I talk about leadership values, competences, also for directors and for for scriptwriters, it's not just because I want them to be managers, it's because artistic collaboration demands that you have really just also knowledge about collaboration. So I'm asking for, and I really hope that we will see a much bigger synergy between knowledge in the research areas and artistic knowledge within the artistic areas. We need to combine the two if we want to have a media industry that's also artistic in the future, because the film industry's weakness is strategy and is knowledge. We have our own experience, but we need to take it to the knowledge level in order to actually develop the industry on a big scale and the artistic expressions on a big scale.
So if I do sum it up, it's probably bringing the startup mindset to the film industry, right? Like being, again, more agile, more collaborative, and at some point trying to turn risks into opportunities, right? Yeah, okay, cool. And which actually brings us back to the brain drain, and it's especially noticeable in the animation industry. A lot of great French and European animators went to the US a few seasons ago to work for big studios there, such as Pixar, and name them. But actually, how can we get them back to Europe? And the question to follow up with for Lina and Vinka is definitely, do talents have this consciousness about being Europeans now, like fast? Of course, they want to tell stories, and that's what they do. But in the end, if they have to weigh the pros and cons between working in various different systems, such Americans, Asians, or European industries, would they make a choice based upon the fact that they feel they're Europeans and Europe needs its talents at some point? But first, about the brain drain and the way we can stop it. And have we stopped it, though?
Yeah, no, I think this is, I would not say finished, because America, of course, they have a lot of other opportunities. But what we see is that the projects themselves need to be very attractive. They prefer to work on the Triples of Belleville or a new film of Anna Frank and Another Day of Life we produced, which was selected last year in Cannes, because for them it's like much more challenging than working on a second Toy Story number 4 or Toy Story number 5 or whatever. So we see that a lot of Belgian but also French talents and other talents are coming back to Europe. So now we are working with somebody, a Flemish guy who's living in San Francisco, but he's only staying there because he has his house and his wife and his kids. he would love to be in the studio. We do it on a remote, so there are techniques to work together with other people from Europe, not based in Brussels. But it's the opposite is coming, and even American people, they're buying studios in Europe because they can drain themselves the talents with the view on the Eiffel Tower. So for them, it's like they understood that green cards and all this stuff is very difficult, and not living in LA, I think it's nice for some years, but at a certain level you want to come back. And the concepts of those films, animation films, and also European films or documentary films are sometimes so attractive that they really prefer to work in Europe, and up to us to finance it, that there's not a huge difference between what they have as a salary, and at the same time they know that they have very good schools also. So they are like very, very welcome by us if they want to come back, but at the same time they see also that they cannot wait too long, because there are a lot of young talents maybe replacing them. So I think it's a very good move from America again to Europe, and they are like sometimes jealous what we are doing in Europe.
Talents are back in animation. That's very good news here. Now, about this fact to be super conscious about being European as talents, do you feel those talents really weigh the pros and cons and actually are making a choice because they're European and they're putting this argument fast, or not really?
Well, first of all, I think it's difficult to talk about talent in like one group. It's very individual, of course. It depends on the person. So I think it's difficult to talk about it like that. But I think the way we can support talent in Europe, or I can mostly speak from a Danish perspective, in Denmark is very, very good. We can offer a lot of creative freedom, a lot of development funding, a lot of close relationships with producers and other creative partners. And I think that's a nice place to be, with freedom and ownership, and also a system around every project that actually wants to take some risks. And I think we have a very good system for that. So I think that will, when you're at that point in your career when you want that, then I think you will be in Europe. And when you want another challenge, playing with a huge studio, then you will be in the United States. So I think it depends on where you want to be in your career.
Sure. Vinke and then Eric.
Yeah, I think that this miracle story of Lina and Gustav and their wonderful film, I think this is due to the fact that we in our country are so privileged that we have a bridging the gap talent development between education and professional industry, which is actually based in the industry. So it's a talent funding that goes with the talent, but still is based in the professional industry. So I think that a European enforcement of talent development on this kind of alumni stage, with bridging the gap from education to industry is that's one really extremely important thing to do. And then and also I would say just in supporting network activities within this strand from education to industry, all initiatives that can help the talent to take their next steps after education is extremely important. And then I would also have to say all network activities that can actually promote knowledge development within the whole industry, that will be of crucial importance for the talent to feel that not just their individual country, because I think that we see ourselves in Europe as first we live in a country and then we live in Europe. But I believe again that the big advantage of Europe is that we can work strategically with the fact of creating better circumstances for the young talent. They all say, they go out and then they come back when they've been in the States and say, where's the freedom, where's the funding? So we have some big advantages.
Come back home, guys. Eric.
No, I agree, but I think there's no excuse for talents because in animation it's so very well organized. You have Cartoon Movie, Cartoon Forum, you have Annecy, you have a lot of opportunities where young people can pitch their concept, but within some weeks it's again Annecy. I think it's the most democratic festival in the world. They don't even have to pay 30 to 40 euros, so, and everything is organized for them. So this was not the case 10, 20 years ago. So it's also thanks to Creative Europe and to the whole industry. So I think if the schools are working, if the schools are very selective, if the talents have something very essential to suggest, to pitch, if the producers are doing their work, then it's very good. I wanted just to give another example. Richard the Stork, what was a very successful computer animated movie, was a concept from a guy from Iran moving to Berlin, and he wanted to make a live action movie, and the Dutch Norwegian producer heard, I don't know where it was the pitch, but it became a film, and a very successful film with 23 countries released. A very interesting box office, even money paid back to the funds, and now it's a sequel. It's a new film. So sequel for me is the first time in my career that I'm making a sequel. I was joking about Toy Story 5, but now I'm making Richard the Stork 2. So I'm a
now
little
who's joking now?
Yeah, bad joke. But this is like, okay, this is like, if what he was telling was a very nice story about how people not from Germany are welcomed in Germany. And there's a very awful bird in the film, what is representing him, and then the storks, the very nice German people. But at the end, it's like a really nice story. And even talking about makes me very emotional because it's success. It's like a non-existing IP produced by European producers together, Luxembourg, Belgium, and Norway and Germany. And so there's a new one. And I think this is something what we have to motivate, that this is possible. And I think with everything what is existing, also in Cannes, then I think there are a lot of opportunities where you can jump on a film. And if you have a good producer or good school, then I think there's, and we have to be very selective, of course, but we have also to be very generous. And I have the impression that I prefer to live in Europe than to go to America. Knocking on the door there, we talked about talents agency, is more difficult than here.
Speaking of opportunities, if you do have a question or reaction to our panelists, now is the time. Any question or reaction on oh, we do actually have one question at least. Yep, just grab the mic.
Mr. Vinke, congratulations on your graduates from your school, but maybe I'm sure there are other people from film schools.
Can you just put the mic to the chin so that we can hear?
Are there other people from film schools here in the audience? I would be very interested, Vinke, to hear a little bit more about your program. Is it a 3-year program? Do you specialize as producers, directors, at what stage of your program? Could you talk us a little bit about your obviously very successful program?
Well, I can talk about the development that just on a very general level, I will answer this question, because I can say that we are actually making major changes to this program for the content of our program. And everybody are very insecure about what it is about, but it has to do with the fact that we feel that we need to reinforce, put more emphasis to the competences we're just talking about today. The fact that we know that the digitization will probably mean that a lot of the jobs that we have today in film industry will be taken over by robots, by artificial intelligence. Just this fact requires education to think very radical on what competences, what education should be about when it's on our top level. So we have always considered us to be an education on master level, and we're actually applying to become an BFA, MFA education, but with strong emphasis on leadership and entrepreneurship, on aesthetics as well, as more general competences, along with of course, the core skills and core competences, and a very practice-based education that will still be the core of the education, but core competences and skills, but combined with broader competences and artistic research as a very crucial knowledge development in order to develop new knowledge on not on what we're doing today, but what it is we want to do tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? We do have one question in the back.
Hello, Mark. Hi, I'm from Film Literacy Europe. I just wanted to talk about diversity. And if we want to have a really diverse group of filmmakers, then the skills development and education needs to start much younger. I would suggest more like 12, so that then a more diverse...
Much too late. Look, they start with their iPad when they're 2.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about more of an organised skills development, because I think that to get to a point where kids from disadvantaged backgrounds can compete on a level playing field with their more affluent counterparts when trying to get into film school, and can feel confident that they could, take out loans and do all of that, and it requires quite a lot of work. And I think that I've visited Denmark. You have some great talent development at a younger age, but a lot of countries that I've worked with and know, including the UK, don't necessarily see that work between 12 and 16 to 18. And I think that is really important if you want a diverse filmmaking workforce.
Yeah, I do agree so much with you, and I just need to say that I think it has to start from when the kids start at school, at least, because today, look at what they're doing. At 12, they're already professionals with their Musical.ly, all their apps. They can program, they can make games, they can make films, and they do it all the time on their iPhones or whatever kind of computerized thing they have, device they have. So I think that this needs to be much more integrated within all phases from the earliest stages of education, and I think it's crucial in order to. We have this brilliant situation that we have so much money right now funding for filmmaking, and people want to invest billions of dollars and euro in filmmaking, but we need the stories, we need the content, we need to make co-creation on a big level in order to have the diversity of our citizens reflect in our stories. The talent is there because we have so many people who want to express themselves, and they do it on an everyday basis. So let's put some effort into qualifying the skills that they're already developing.
But I think also a last remark on diversity. I like it a lot, of course, and we need to stimulate this. But when I see how different some film funds are working in Europe, and we always talk about Denmark, and it's good, because you have you are like an example, and other film funds are trying to, not to copy, but to inspire. But when we do a co-production, and when I see how difficult some countries, difficulties they have to get a small budget for a film, so how you can imagine, and that's the problem with Europe for the moment, how you can imagine that we all need to work together with this kind of unrespectful differences on this kind of film business. So this is why sometimes, and I like the story about Afghanistan, sometimes, of course, our responsibility is also to welcome a talent from another country or to work with them. But it's extremely urgent that all Europe is a little bit, let's talk about ecology. It's the same. Some countries are really fighting for it, and some countries are even not knowing that. And this is the same with culture and with film business or our business. I think they need really on Europe, because we have to vote very soon. Well, they need to make not one format, but at least to try to have all similar possibilities for all those countries.
And yeah, in 3 days from now, you're going to be able to vote, actually. So show up to the polls, and maybe you can make things happen. Lina, you wanted also to have a perspective and to say on this question of diversity.
Yeah, just in addition to what Vinka said, I also think it's our responsibility to show young people that it is possible to do films, because it can sense like a closed club that you're not able to access, that it's for only very well-educated people to do films. I think it's important that we show another way that you can do films even though you come from other places and even though you're not schooled. I think we need some examples on that to encourage very young people to think, wait, maybe it is a possibility for me to do films.
Thank you very much. Without further ado, I think it's time to actually bring an end to this European Film Forum here at the Cannes Film Festival. Thank you so much for your perspective, though, on the way we can bring more diversity, skills to talents, and just bear in mind that they need to be agile and prepare for something which is not preparable whatsoever, the future. Thank you so much again, guys. And before we do celebrate in a European spirit this Cannes Film Festival, it's my great pleasure to welcome on stage again a member of the European Parliament, Helga Truppel, for the conclusion, actually, of this European Film Forum.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we are finishing this wonderful afternoon. The European Union means to be different without fear. That is the slogan of the Citizens' Initiative Pulse of Europe, and I think it applies as well to our afternoon here. Talents, diversity of persons, of member states, of markets, that is really at the core of the European Union. And European Union as well means that everybody is different, but that everybody wants to be treated the same. That is about the rule of law, the fundamentals of our political union. And I think what we have urgently to learn, to live with diversity, to enjoy it. And what for me was very important, what I just heard by one of the panelists, with the upcoming of artificial intelligence, our ability to criticize and to distinguish what the algorithms can do and what is our human impact, it's of really urgency, and that especially our kids are educated on that, because that will, in the very end, decide about the quality of democracy and the way we live together. So for me, what is truly important, and I would like to foster it, all this kids' development, to empower them, and really starting at an early age, as you said, is absolutely crucial. And I think with the upcoming elections now, we have to defend the democratic concept of culture against all the nationalists who use culture as their way of a cultural war, as Steve Bannon is talking about, to go against our concept of freedom in society, openness and diversity. We have to defend liberal democracy against illiberal democracy. We have to fight against the authoritarian nationalist thinking all over Europe and beyond, but our responsibility is the European Union, are our member states. And therefore, European films and all you guys working on that, on the diversity of films, is crucial for maintaining liberal democracy. It's very much about European spirit, our way of understanding innovation, and that indeed means empowerment of talents, development of talents, and what for me was crucial, what you just said, it's so many people want to express themselves, and our duty as politicians is to make that possible. Thank you very much. Enjoy the drinks and have a good time here. Thank you.